Hi everyone, I'm here with Joanne Cobb, who is my Pilates mentor, and we're going to speak about our own experiences of teaching Pilates and some of the common things that we see out there in the Pilates world. Welcome, Jo.
I'm so chuffed to be here. Thank you for asking me.
I'm chuffed to have you here. Yeah, really excited about today's talk. Jo, what I like to do is really allow my guests to introduce themselves and tell everyone a little bit about the wonderful, wonderful work that you do.
So I originally was a school teacher and moved to Ireland and couldn't teach because I don't speak Irish. So went into fitness and then found Pilates and then just saw how amazing it is and how beneficial and just it's to me it's just the best system for bringing out the best in us in every single way. So for me it became a super passion, and so I sort of specialized in it, and then I've been doing it now for about 22, 23 years, so quite a while.
Wow, that makes me feel like I'm right at the beginning of my Pilates journey. So
Yeah.
I think I qualified in 2016, and I
Mhm.
found you, I think, around 2016. So I didn't train with you initially, did I? I wish I did in hindsight.
Oh,
But I've done most of my, in comparison to the training that I did to become a Pilates teacher versus all the CPD hours that I've done, that's all been bar one, bar two, that's all been with you actually over
oh.
all those years. But yeah, similar to you, I really found Pilates through, well, actually just through, so I worked in corporate and I found Pilates through my running, and I'm a very injury prone person. And I found that Pilates was the only thing that got the best out of my running. So as soon as I started doing my Pilates stuff, my running just became more efficient. I moved better. And it was kind of this thing where I wasn't aware that my body could move that well.
Mm.
And that's where my passion came from. And yeah, I'm just so glad that I found you, because I think to do training to qualify was hard. I mean, I failed my teaching assessment first time round, passed it second time around. Don't be so shocked.
Awesome. No, that
And
was
then
a mistake. That must have been a
yeah,
mistake.
that was a mistake. And then that where I really learned was through actually teaching, actually getting out there and having my own classes, but also the stuff that you do in your CPD. Like, I think, all your workshops and things like that, that was where I think I could have easily just had Pilates as sort of like, oh, a little side thing that I do. And I think having that sort of space to go deeper into the knowledge was what really made me take it this far. I mean, I've been doing this since 2016, which is almost unheard of for me to stick something out. So something must be going well.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's an incredible longevity with Pilates, either whether you're a student of it or whether you're a teacher of it. And I think that, it's not just what you learn, first of all, there's so much depth that you can dig down into, and into all aspects of our life, our exercise, everything. And it's just so linked, and it gives us that feeling that you're never bored. And I think that's part of the longevity of it. You're constantly, well, I am constantly energized and reinvigorated through, working with people and seeing what people's needs are as teachers and as practitioners of Pilates. And that's really where the workshops spring from. It's not that we do Pilates for runners, Pilates for this, it's like looking at just the whole of our environment and everything, and just then digging deeper. And that's what I love about it. I really, really love that.
Yeah, I think longevity, I've written that down because I think that's such a wonderful way to describe it. I mean, Pilates is one of those sort of exercises and classes that you see people of all age ranges, and even amongst the teachers you see all sorts of age ranges. And there's a forum that was in forum, it was on Facebook, I was in making it sound, we in the 90s forum. There was a Facebook question pop up on Facebook, and somebody was asking, bit boring, but they were asking about pension and what people have been doing. And many of us were saying that we'll probably never retire. I don't ever plan to retire. I won't be a Pilates teacher in the way that I am now, but I'll always be doing some form of work. And I sort of said that. And then someone was talking about, how long they intend to do Pilates for. And one of the teachers was in her 70s. And I just thought, it's that brilliant. Like it has that amount of longevity, and just so much depth that you can go into with it. It's lifelong.
That was it. I remember a couple of years ago, one of my family members said to me, so what are you going to do in 10 years? Because you can't keep doing this because, you'll be too old. And I was like, whoa.
First of all, 10 years, hello.
Yeah. I was like, no, this is something that I think it's inspirational to see. You look at how long Joseph Pilates, to the end of his life, you look at any of the elders, it's not a sort of young things. Do you know? I mean, it's for everyone, but it's inspirational, and it's just something that's part of us, and it just is there forever. Really,
it's there forever. Do you know what? We sound so enthusiastic about it.
It's like,
can't fake this passion.
Somebody, oh my God, is there an advert going to scroll by in a moment?
It's hilarious. This is how I get when I talk about Pilates. So I absolutely love it.
Me too. The hands are going and everything.
All the movement, Jo. So if we think about Pilates, and one of the first things that I had to learn was the Pilates principles. And we're not going to go through all the principles, but what are some of the principles that sort of come to mind when I say to you Pilates principles, and what's your sort of way of implementing those principles into the work that you do versus how they may have been initially taught?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because the Pilates principles weren't actually written down by Joseph Pilates. They were done by two students of Romana's who wrote a book, and the principles are in there. Were first recorded in there, but they are sort of like, this is what the guiding principles are for Pilates movement. And for me, though, I think the Pilates teacher themselves has to embody them as well. And we can think of it as a slightly different way. So, for example, centering, to me, it's about your powerhouse, it's about your center, but it's also deeper as a Pilates teacher. So you have to know your foundations, your point of essence. And that to me is knowing Joseph Pilates' work. So say when I train people, I'm really, I can't tell them how important it is that they know the original work, but then we adapt, we modify, we make it potentially more accessible, so that it's there for everyone. But you have to know where you're coming from. Otherwise, I see teachers that often lack confidence because they sort of do their training, but they don't actually know, okay, is this really Pilates? Am I right? And so you see that come through in their teaching. And often when I'm, chatting to a teacher who's feeling a little bit deflated, it's often because they've lost confidence in themselves. And I think so and don't get me wrong, I am still constantly learning about Joseph Pilates' work. I think we never stop learning, but you have to have that, okay, I know this, I've looked at it, I've worked on it, I studied it. And so knowing his work, knowing that center, that essence of and the other thing is as a teacher, knowing your values, what do you want to bring? So to me, that's sort of like the centering bit,
Yeah, I love that. And what about perfection? I'm going to come on to it, but it's one of the ones. So the precision. Yeah, that's what it is. It's not called perfection. That'd be strange. Yeah, no. It's precision.
But it is. And I think you're right to mix it up with perfection, because often people think things have to be perfect, precise in the way they do it. And again, to me, when I think of it for our teaching purposes, it's more about you do the work yourself. So I have that hashtag, it's a very long hashtag. It's hard. It's like, oh, I've spelt it wrong again. I have to delete the whole word to start again. Just a Pilates teacher who doesn't do Pilates, because the precision to me is not perfection, but that you are trying constantly to move yourself forwards or go deeper into the work, to have a more precise understanding of the work rather than being a perfect performance, So precision to me is that, I do Pilates almost every day, and it might only be 5 minutes. I never have an hour. Days of me doing an hour are long gone, half an hour, perfect time, 20 minutes, even better though.
Yeah.
And in that, I'm thinking of, okay, how am I feeling? So for me, precision is doing the work yourself, and so finding your precise thoughts on it, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense or not to you.
It makes perfect sense, actually. No pun intended, but it does. And one thing I've noticed since I've started sort of recording Pilates, and I think I probably do it in classes as well, is that I'm always sort of thinking about how my body's moving in that moment and how can I make minor adjustments, and also just appreciate that there are just some things that our body just can't do without that feeling really uncomfortable and tense. But it is that constant self-improvement that we're doing through our daily practice, you know, practice in my case, but it's the stuff that we discover as we move and allow ourselves to have that freedom of movement, in order to really see where the sort of little kinks are and what our own little body quirks are, and things like that.
And that's why, you know, for me, I don't let people look in a mirror. I don't have mirrors at all in my studio. I turn people, if I am in a studio with mirrors, I turn them away, because it's not about the visual performance. It's about how it's feeling for you and the sensation, and just feeling amazing, but connected to your body. You know, I think often we're disconnected, and suddenly we're like, somebody say, oh, your head's not in the right place. You're like, what? You know, it's like, how you almost think, how can I not know where I am in space? But we just do, we become can become a bit disconnected. So I think giving yourself the space just to reconnect is just, you know, so important.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it is, I've so many times, even like whenever I've had injuries and I've gone for physio, they'll ask you to go through a series of different movements, and then that's where you discover there's a whole plane of movement in a certain part of your body that you actually can't do. Yeah. And I find that happens in Pilates classes a lot. You'll say something like, you know, side series, bring leg up to hip height, bring your bottom leg up to your top leg. So what's that, adduction of the bottom leg, top leg. And then someone will look at me as if to say, can my body even do that? Because they can't put that mind to the muscle to do that movement, because it's not an everyday movement. Yeah. And so, is that sensation, and understanding where you hold your body in space. I think that is so key. Love it. And that's stuff that you take with you off the mat, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's what we want, because at the end of the day, and I think this is where Pilates has a bit of a disconnect from our everyday life, or can do, because, you know, Joe Pilates, his system was about helping us to perform our daily tasks. And I think he said something like, with zest and pleasure, you know, and so that's what we're doing it for, not an isolated, perfect movement on a mat that actually, when we walk out, we don't carry it with us. We want it to be this lovely, efficient movement that's taken throughout our daily life. Yeah.
And actually that leads us quite nicely onto another topic that I wanted to discuss, which is this term, the Pilates body, and how somehow Pilates I don't know when this happened, and maybe you do, but when did it become about aesthetics, and when did we lose it being about the movement?
Yeah, I mean, and this is just my point of view,
of course.
But, you know, if we look at Joe's work, we've got two exercises, the one leg stretch and the double leg stretch. Now, you know, the sort of things that I've been told is that Romana then added in the single leg straight stretch, double leg straight stretch, crisscross, and made it the stomach series, or, you know, and so suddenly two exercises that Joe created, which were about an internal digestive massage, became an abdominal series, and taking it to the aesthetics of getting a six-pack and doing all this. So for me, I think it was just drifted into this aesthetics, rather than, you know, if you read Joseph Pilates' book, he's all about the internal work, the sensation, you know, it's very different than suddenly it was about the physicality, as in the physical look of things, and becoming this stomach series. So that's sort of like a sort of example of how I think the work has changed. And I'm not blaming Romana, please don't think I am, but it is just this, you know, where did it lose that we should be working from the toes to the top of your head, and everything's alive in the work, inside and out, to suddenly it being this focus on a six-pack and abdominals, and, you know, and I think it's really hard, because it doesn't encourage the sort of diversity we want coming to our classes, or it makes people feel they're not good enough, or they don't look right, or they're too old, or I can't do this because I'm not strong enough in my, my abdominals or whatever. And you're just like, no, it's not about that. It's about the efficiency and the joy in movement.
Yeah, and actually that brings us quite nicely on to diversity and how important it is to have diversity within the Pilates community amongst teachers and those who are practicing as well. I mean, what are some of the things that you would say to people out there who maybe don't see themselves represented in the Pilates community?
Yeah, and it's hard because when anybody looks to join teacher training with me, one of the first things they say is, but what if I'm not good enough? What if I can't do the advanced work, or I'm older? That's another thing. People say, am I too old? Or, I'm not the right shape. Or, even things like clothing, people think they have to be in a certain style of clothing and so on. And you really just want people to know that, it's just not about that. It's not about how the aesthetics. It's not about worrying what everybody else is doing. This is a moment for you. And one of my busiest classes used to be in a lunchtime in a huge corporate environment. And I used to get about 50 people come in, and I'd say 80% were men, because they didn't even bring a mat. They just, honestly, because it was like a carpet, they might have brought a towel if they wanted to, but we just lay down and they just did half an hour Pilates. And it ran for about 4 years, twice a week. It was heaving, and it was the accessibility of it. It was the fact that nobody was a certain shape, size, they just came, we just moved, and then they went back to work. And that's what it should be. It should be, part and parcel of just everyday living.
Absolutely. And I think that brings me quite nice on to thinking about one of the common things that I hear from clients who want to join a class and then don't or unsure whether they should join is flexibility, but I'm not flexible enough.
Yes. And do you know what? I find that really interesting, because if you look at how Joseph Pilates tells us to do the work and videos of, flexibility hardly comes into it. It's about strength and power and using the correct place in the body to ground to get the movement. Whereas I think, especially like social media, you see all these, beautiful bodies, doing these, very deep flexion exercises. But actually, if you look closer, they're relying on their flexibility, not their power. Yeah. And so I think you can shift things as well to, just encourage people to know, we want to build strength. You're strong, you're going to be able to do this. And, but also knowing that you can adapt the exercises to suit you at the time, at that moment in time that you're doing the exercises. But I think, especially as teachers, we do have a responsibility with our advertising, our marketing, just to keep awareness of, the people we want to encourage to do Pilates. We want it to be a gift for everyone,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is a real key point, that it is what we see in the marketing as well. Like, what do people, yes, if we're advertising our own work, then we're using our own bodies. But that's where the diversity of teachers is important. But then those teachers who maybe fit into the the beauty standards of today maybe want to think about what other images they're using in their social media and their marketing efforts, so that they are making sure that they're having their classes that they are accessible to all, and that all are welcome.
Yeah, and I also think as well, something that I can't speak highly enough of is empathy. If you're not the sort of seen as the perfect body or whatever people idea of it is, people empathize you. At the end of the day, it's a connection. People love Pilates because of the connection between not just you, but the other class members. It's all about the joy of just the community spirit of it. And it's empathizing. It's, it's knowing how somebody feels, or recognizing, if, because we can't obviously know all the time, but it's allowing that to happen. And I think if there's that pedestal sort of, environment or whatever, that sense of I'm never going to be as good as you or whatever, it's not about that. And I think empathy is something that needs to be really thought about often, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as a teacher really strengthens your own practice, no, well, your own skills as well, like understanding how different bodies move. Because I remember when I first went into teaching, like, you know, you do your training stuff, but when I actually first got in front of lots of different bodies, and then an exercise that I know the look of because I've been watching Pilates teachers do it all the time, you get into the real world and you're like, oh, sometimes I'd be like, what is happening here? So it's understanding that different bodies are going to move differently and the exercises are going to look different on different bodies. So that, yeah, again, that importance of it all.
And I think that, you know, like Kathy Grant, one of the Pilates elders who worked with Joseph Pilates, I've done some training with sort of like students of hers over the years. And, you know, Blossom Crawford, I remember her saying to me on one training course that, you know, Kathy was great at saying the movements for you, so it's going to feel different. She was very much about the individuality of in your teaching, and you might do it this way, but you might do it this way. And that's, I think, what needs to be brought through as well, that it's not a rule book that this is this and this is this. This is what it could be like, but you know what? It could also be like this. Yeah.
And letting people, you know, as much as we can give modifications, allowing people to find their own, because it's only so many that we can think of within our own sort of body and knowledge, but allowing people to really find what works well for them.
Yeah, exactly. And giving people that space, because at the end of the day, they've got to work it out for themselves, and they've got to, that's how it gets carried in away outside of the studio as well.
Yeah. And actually that makes me think about gratitude, which is how this all came about, wasn't it? It was for World Gratitude Day. Joe, you don't think we scripted this, I'm telling you. But it makes me think about gratitude, because one of the things that really makes me quite sad when I'm teaching people is how critical people can get of their bodies and what it can't do. And just, I don't know, what are your thoughts about like encouraging people to find that, and for teachers to encourage people finding gratitude on the things that they can do?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, as a teacher, I think you've got to set people up to succeed. So if you set them up for success, that feeling of, yes, I can do this, that self-efficacy is so important, that self-confidence, that belief that you can do something. You can add challenge, but you want to set people up to succeed. And then from that, you would then allow, it's about, so say, for example, an exercise like the roll-up. A lot of people think to succeed at it, I've got to get to the mat and I've got to get back up. So you see people flinging themselves back up in any way they can. Whereas if a teacher, if we can focus on the shape they make or the sensation they have as they're going through the movement, I don't care if you get to the floor or not. What I love is the feeling of celebration of how easy it feels to get to that point, how fluid, how, you know, that's what we want people to feel, not to feel that they are forcing themselves back up, throwing themselves around just because the belief is that's where I should get to. So I think it's all about that, encouraging the sensation during the movement and forget the end result, you know, the sort of the end position, you know.
Yeah.
Like 100, the amount of times I see people puffing and panting to, like, the teacher's going, we're going to do 10 breaths. You know, just do 3 breaths, just do 4 breaths, do what feels best for you. So yeah, as a teacher, I think you've got to give people space to make a decision, decide, and focus on that sensation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that makes me think a lot about my original training, which was a lot of corrections, so many corrections, when it would just, first of all, when you're correcting, it is almost like it's helpful. We have to correct, but there's got to be a limit. Otherwise you just stifle the movement and you're almost unafraid to move. I used to feel more tension through not wanting to be corrected and to get it perfect, as opposed to be like, well, what if you just move?
Just move. What if we allow you? And that's why when I teach, I generally pick 1 or 2 battles. I call it that. As people are doing, I'll pick 2 things. That's all, just to add in. But as well, I think as a teacher, you've got to be careful when you do hands-on as well, because what I think is, when you go to put, and some people call it hands-on correction. So whenever you go close to somebody to change them, they're like, oh, I've done it wrong again. She's on her way over to me. I've done it wrong again. Whereas instead, if we think of it as hands-on teaching and sort of encourage So say if somebody's, maybe I need to just shift things, we can make it more of a positive experience and sort of say, okay, push up into my hand or whatever, instead of saying, oh, can you just do this more and I'm going to do it for you. It's that sort of shift from hands-on correction to hands-on help or enhancement. Or do you know what? Do you get what I mean, Kasia? Or am I just waffling?
Yeah, no, definitely, because I've noticed that you do, when you do that hands-on teaching, you very much you do things like you'll show the sensation, that you do use pressure and that tactile sort of feedback, which I think speaks better to the body, because when we start doing it in our minds, that's when we'll start over analyzing too much. And yeah, absolutely, like picking your battles, because I notice if I go to a class and say you've given 1 or 2 corrections, even if they're not even towards me, but I just think, oh yeah, I'm doing that too, that stays with me forever. Like it doesn't leave. And I think that's way more helpful than having 1,000 different corrections and then none of them really sticking.
Yeah, and I think that leads back to your connection with the class, because a lot of teachers have just like a script and they'll like say, we're going to do this exercise, and that's fine, but you're just talking at people. You've got to, I always say, I don't do Pilates at you. We do it, you do it with me, and it's got to be that I'm looking at you. I'm not just saying my script. I'm like thinking, okay, what do I actually need to say? Because otherwise I'm just being very boring.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I'm a chatterbox anyway, but 2, when I teach, I'm always sometimes I'll give a bit of information on the exercise itself as to like, how it comes about and maybe what its objective might be and things like that. But yeah, like thinking about what knowledge can I share as we do this movement that someone could take away with them, rather than just setting up the exercise, counting the reps and then moving on to the next one, which is just so, anyone could do that on a piece of paper, couldn't you?
But I think that's leading us almost back to the beginning, where we were saying about what keeps us energized and loving our jobs. And that's because we're constantly upgrading, thinking, refreshing, because every time somebody walks in, even if it's the same person, they're different. Something's happened, you're adjusting, and that keeps us just really fresh, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And so if we think about, we've touched on it slightly around sort of what common limiting beliefs that Pilates instructors often have coming in. One of the things you mentioned was age. Are there any others that you hear?
Yeah, I mean, not being the right body shape, which, just so is, I can understand people feeling it, but I just want people to know that anybody can do Pilates. That's, first of all, it's so accessible. There's adaptations, there are modifications, but as soon as you start, you will start building the strength, building the movement. And, it's about that. And it's about the sensation of it. And another thing, ability, people really worry about their ability. But again, it's something we're always going forwards. We're always moving. We're always improving. And I think, you've got to start, and there's so much to enjoy and that we gain from Pilates. It's incredible. It's incredible to do and help people to feel. And I think, people really need help to feel better. Do you know what I mean? To have a better sense of well-being. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of, just things like people not sleeping and, all that sort of thing, that outside influence that we can just give a little oasis sometimes to just downgrade a little bit, just let ourselves, have a safe space. And it just helps people cope, I think, so much better. I probably drifted off into something else.
No, I think that's beautiful. I think it's so true. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned ability as well, because I always say, there's so many exercises in Pilates that I actually can't do well, but it's just one of those things, and I'm okay with it because there's so many of the moves that I can do really well. It doesn't matter if I'm doing well or not, but it's the point is that there are things that my body loves to do, and there are things that my body just says, you know what, I don't think we're going to get there on this one, but we can just enjoy where we're at, and that's it.
Exactly. And I think that, especially in the UK, we have such an amazing mat style of Pilates. Mat is everywhere. It is so well loved in the UK. But what people need to remember is, the equipment helps you do your mat. The mat is actually the hardest. So sometimes if you can't do a teaser on your mat, put you in a studio, you'd absolutely fly doing it on a Cadillac. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So it's just forgiving a little bit, you know, if we were in a Pilates studio, you'd be flying through this. Do you know what I mean? And so not always thinking the teaser is going to be the limit, you know, where I have to get to.
Yeah, that's actually such a good point. And I always forget that the order of that went. So it was the equipment was to facilitate the mat work.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, so a lot of people think reformer is harder than mat because you feel an intensity of the work, but the intensity of the work is what helps you then go onto the mat where you've got nothing to push or pull against. You've just got gravity in your own body weight. And that's so hard. So, you know, the piece of equipment facilitate your mat. So sometimes I think, you know, I love the fact that we have mat throughout and such a strong love of mat work. But yeah, to know that if I was in a studio, this exercise would be a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, and that again sort of goes back to that accessibility, because most people only have access to mats. Yeah. And you know, some might even have maybe even the Pilates ring or even you know, the oval. So like most people will just have their floor and a mat, and so recognizing then that in itself can create certain limitations, and again, that is okay.
Exactly. And just acknowledging that it's fine that you can't do this, you know, but you know, there'll be so many other things we can do, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's something I love as well. There are just so many variations of, you know, of one move. You could do so many variations, like the possibilities are like endless.
Exactly. And that's just the absolute beauty of Pilates, you know.
Brilliant. Well, look, Jo, thanks so much for joining. I think this has just been brilliant. And I know I'm going to, because you're really good at your little quotes. I said to you, I know you're going to come with some snippets of quotes. I'm going to be like, quote, Joanne Cobb.
Kettle of fish, though. I don't know where the kettle of fish came from.
We'll take it. We'll have it. It's a new one. It's another modification. That's what we do. But before we left, because you know, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to spend this time with you, because your Pilates community that you set up with the J Pilates Associates is one of, and I'm not just saying this for sake of saying this, one of my favorite resources. I have always invested into that because it has given me, it's priceless what I've gotten out of it, from the meeting different teachers, for even giving me that space to be who I am in my Pilates work, rather than trying to be like another Pilates instructor. I've actually just been myself, which is actually quite nice as well. So if I think about my favorite Pilates resources, that would be the first one that I would definitely name. But I'm really keen to hear what your favorite resources are.
Well, they tend to chop and change a little bit. So since the last year or two, I've really been diving into Joe's work and his archival work. So I love following Elaine Ewing, who has an Instagram account called @OriginalPilatesPhotos. And she's sharing so many different images of Joe, Corolla, just and I've absolutely loved delving into it and looking at it and seeing head positions. And I know they're just moments in time, but in the background, looking at the studio, what's out there. And so I've really gone probably more historical recently, and really enjoying it. And on Pilates Anytime, for example, they've got their legacy project, which is looking at all the history and talking to the elders. And so I love that, you know, hearing firsthand, you know, all the different stories, because it really brings to life what we do full time, and it gives that centering that I really, really think is so important, you know. So I would think something like the Legacy Project. I love looking at the elders and their generational teachers that have come through and sort of doing all the different, you know, styles of it, because I think when you look at the different elders and the people that have come through on their lineages, they're so different. And there's that. So when people think of Pilates as being one way only, we follow this order, we do this, we don't deviate. You then look at the different elders and you're like, hold on a minute, look at the variety and all the different options we have. And that's just what I love. And so it sort of makes me think, yeah, you can play, you can get creative, but just know your center.
No, I love that.
at the moment.
It's another quote there, Joe. Can get creative, but know your center. Can apply to so many areas of life. Oh, amazing. Joe, so let us know, let people know where they can find you, so your socials, and whether you have any work. So this is coming out end of September 2022. Are there any workshops that people can look forward to, or things that you're working on at the moment?
I mean, obviously on the website, so jpilates.co.uk, and keep an eye on like Instagram, you know, I'm jpilates UK. But yeah, there's loads. So say if you are interested in like breaking down the mat work from Joe's point of view, I've got a workshop on that. I've also got another workshop called the Pilates Playground, where we get super creative with everything. And then I've got a new mat intake starts in January, ready for the new year. And yeah, I just love providing resources for people. And obviously the associates is just ongoing. We're yeah, still going there.
Yeah. So, brilliant. Thanks so much, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you spending the time to chat with us.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.